Greetings, family. Peace and love to you and yours. This is Guru, and thanks again for joining my channel. Family, this video is about Ellison, who once proposed making a separate country for blacks. This is an interesting story. Let's go to it. Some newly discovered columns shed light on the shocking views expressed by one of the Democrats' favorite politicians, Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota, now in the running to be DNC chair, has attracted the support of Senator Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Harry Reid. Many think that Ellison, an African American Muslim, would make a powerful statement leading the DNC. Ellison's past has gained attention from the media, with Ellison being accused of anti-Semitism and ties to the Nation of Islam. Back in 2006, when Ellison was first entering national politics, Scott W. Johnson wrote in the Weekly Standard, Ellison was born Catholic in Detroit. He states that he converted to Islam in an undergraduate at Wayne State University. As a third-year student at the University of Minnesota Law School in 1989 to 1990, he wrote 2 columns for the Minnesota Daily under the name Keith Hakeem. In the first, Ellison refers to Minister Louis Farrakhan, defends Nation of Islam spokesman Khalid Abdul Muhammad, and speaks in the voice of a Nation of Islam advocate, whatever that means. In the second, Hakeem demands reparations for slavery and throws in a demand for an optional, separate homeland for American blacks. The Washington Post also recently wrote about Ellison's past columns with an article published last week citing an Associated Press article about Ellison. Quote, around 1990, Ellison, then a University of Minnesota law student known as Keith E. Hakeem, wrote several columns in the student newspaper that are getting a second look. One column defended Farrakhan against charges of anti-Semitism. A second suggested the creation of a state for black residents. In 1995, Ellison helped organize a delegation to Farrakhan's Million Man March in Washington. And as you all remember, the Million Man March was a huge success. The Daily Caller News Foundation did some digging to find the columns written in the Minnesota Daily under the pen name Keith E. Hakeem. Now, family, I just want you to note that this article I'm reading, they wanted to make sure that you got the exact name to look under, because they made sure that they quoted his full name that they looked under to get this information. So they want to make sure that you get it too. But I digress. Back to the article. And so the DCNF obtained scans of 4 columns written by Hakeem as a law student. Ellison was around 26 years old at the time these columns were written and published. Over 4 columns, Hakeem advocates cash reparations paid from whites to blacks, calls the Constitution the quote, best evidence of a white racist conspiracy to subjugate other peoples, unquote, and proposes making a separate country for black people. The first column, published on November 1st, 1989, is titled, African Americans Are Best Equipped for Fighting Drugs, unquote. The piece opens up with the sentence, quote, years ago it was slavery and, more recently, the Jim Crow system. But today it appears that the rationale for black people having no rights, which a white man is bound to respect, is crime. In the column, Ellison writes that the black community does a better job keeping drugs off the streets than the police do. The Nation of Islam is specifically mentioned and praised for having the, quote, most notable results, unquote, in fighting drugs. And family, we also know that to be true as well. The Southern Poverty Law Center describes the Nation of Islam as having a, quote, bizarre theology of innate black superiority over whites, unquote. Well, I'm going to stop right there and just add my 2 cents that it has nothing to do with a bizarre theology of innate black superiority over whites. There's nothing bizarre about it. Actually, blacks have proven over and over and over and over and over again that we far excel when we are given opportunities of competing. And that's what the problem is for white racists and most white people in general and in particular, is you just do not like competition, especially from a black man. Because see, black men especially, we know we have to be 3 times better than a white man. So therefore already we're starting off hungry. And you can't take that kind of competition. So I get it. We get it. I digress. Getting back to this story. Ellison writes, quote, in Minneapolis and across the country, this black crime thing manifests itself as the war on drugs and as police brutality. The white perpetual link between the two is simple. Drugs are out of hand. In fact, America is at war against drugs. But we know that the war on drugs actually turned out to be the war on black people, as exposed by our government. Quote, also, black criminals are out of hand. They rape, they form gangs, they drive down property values. When the black crime problem and the drug problem intersect, all African Americans become drug suspects and any violent act is justified. Unquote. A scan of the entire column can be viewed here. Well, I'm not going to go to that column here, family. The next column, coming later the same month, ran on November 27, 1989, and it's entitled, Minister Farrakhan Never Claimed to Be a Malcolm X. The article discusses the nature of racism. Quote, racism means conspiracy to subjugate and actual subjugation. That means planned social, economic, military, religious, and political subjugation of whites. It cannot be intelligently argued that the Nation of Islam is doing this. In fact, blacks have no history of harming or subjecting whites as a class. On the other hand, whites have it written into their very constitution that blacks shall be considered 3/5 of a person for purposes of taxation and representation of their white owners. Their constitution also makes provisions for the return of runaway slaves. Their constitution is the bedrock of American law. It's the best evidence of a white racist conspiracy to subjugate other peoples. Unquote. The column also seems to defend the opinion that asserting interests of a racial group doesn't make one a racist. Quote, I would like to offer an explanation of why anyone who boldly asserts the interest of blacks is assailed as a racist, a philanderer, or a criminal, unquote, he continues. And so I'm going to stop right there and just make that a point that surely that anyone who boldly asserts the interest of blacks, well, every time that happens, yes, the people are called a racist because you're asserting the rights of black people for some reason, or the interest of black people. And when that happens, yes, you get the real racists who come out and say, no, it's racist. When in actuality, what you're doing is you're trying to make a wrong a right. But anytime that effort is made, they say, oh no, that's racist. So I digress, moving back into the article. Quote, it goes back to those old American laws forbidding anyone from assisting a slave to gain freedom. Any person, black or white, who attempts to disrupt the slaveocracy or white supremacist hierarchy will come under attack by the white supremacist and their trained stooges, unquote. And in the same issue, another writer criticizes Hakim and accuses him of anti-Semitism, writing, quote, Keith Hakim should name the certain forces who were opposed to Dr. Muhammad's speeches on campus. These forces are Jews, myself included, unquote. A scan of the entire column can be viewed here. Well, I'm not going to go to that one either. The third column family from November 30th, 1989 is titled Daily Editorial Staff Should Feel Ashamed, unquote. This column addresses some conflict with the staff of the Minnesota Daily over the previous column Hakim had penned. So let's go to that. Quote, the news media prints only the most sensational bits and pieces, never the whole story. This leaves people believing that the Nation of Islam is some kind of black Ku Klux Klan, and they immediately dismiss all of its laudable work, unquote, Hakim writes. In the same issue, Hakim is criticized by another writer for the newspaper, who writes, quote, to hear Hakim blather, one might think that slavery was invented and employed solely by Western Europeans. Ever heard of the Zulus? Question mark. One might think that blacks are a very unique group of humans in that they are incapable of practicing racism, unquote. Well, family, before I move on from this point, I'd just like to point out that one convenient thing that Europeans do not have is the ability to talk about slavery, because even though they were the masters and the perfectionists of slavery, the bondage slavery that they put on our ancestors was a type of slavery that has never been seen in the face of humanity. So they not only took slavery to a whole different level, but they try to compare their slavery to everyone else's that has existed in history. And there is no documented slavery coming out of Africa that even relates hardly to what the Europeans have done to black Americans. Not even. If they have it, please produce it. You're welcome to leave the evidence, leave a link or what have you in the subject line. I'd appreciate it. Or explain your position if you can. Most of you can't do that, though. You guys always have to supply a link or something. You can never be intelligent enough to leave a comment that, that's a rebuttal. You hardly ever do that. So I get it if you have to leave a Wikipedia link. That's the best you guys can do. I get it. Okay. Moving on. So back to this point, though. No, when you compare slavery, there's no comparison of the slavery that white Europeans put Africans through the Atlantic slave trade. There's nothing like it on the face of the earth. So when people talk about the Holocaust with the Jews, no. The Black Holocaust is far, far worse than a Jew can ever speak of. You guys just got away with constantly talking about your own. But the African Holocaust is far worse than a Jew can talk about. And I digress. I will get back into this. So it says a scan of both Hakim's columns and two others criticizing him can be viewed here. The fourth and final column written by Hakim is the most inflammatory, published on February 2nd, 1990, and it entitled, quote, affirmative action does not make up for past injustice, unquote. The article pushes for reparations for slavery and giving back the article pushes for reparations for slavery and giving black Americans the option of a separate black homeland. Quote, since no one but the WASP elite really appreciates affirmative action, I have a challenge for all fair-minded, middle, and working-class white people. I will urge black people to abandon white-dominated, integration-oriented giveaway programs if you urge white people to justly compensate black people for 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, and 25 years of neo-Jim Crow. The settlement could be a straight cash transfer for all the black exploitation. This means just compensation for all the labor hours put in by the slaves and just compensation for all the intellectual and artistic property ripped off by all the Elvis Presleys and Pat Boones. It means compensation for all the money ripped off through sharecropping and just compensation owing to all the black athletes of yesterday, such as Jack Johnson and Joe Louis. It means back payment of the black tax, which is the price hike that ghetto merchants and pawnbrokers charge black consumers. The article proposes a separate country for blacks as well, writing, quote, finally, blacks would have the option of choosing their own land base or remaining in the United States. Since black people toiled most diligently in the southeastern section of the United States, this land, quite naturally, would be most suitable. That means Arkansas, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Blacks, of course, would not be compelled to move to the black state, and, of course, peaceful whites would not be compelled to move away. This is a bargain. I'll repeat, he says, this is a bargain. Whites would be relieved of the burdens of the black-faced but white-dominated social programs. Blacks would employ themselves, teach their own children the truth, and control their own neighborhoods. Black-white interaction would be voluntary instead of compelled. No more busing, no more affirmative action, and best of all, no more white guilt. White people could righteously say they have settled their debts with blacks. Urban blacks, long alienated from society by poverty, forced segregation, and media vilification, would no longer strike fear in whites. Think of it. Whites could reclaim their cities without depossessing anyone. Now, the liberals may oppose this reparations program because, of course, they justify their existence by championing so-called lost causes. A full scan of the article can be viewed here, which I am not going to show, and should be read to obtain more details on Hakeem's reparation plans. Well, family, for you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to get those links to those documents, and if you want to look those up, you'll be able to do so. So, family, like you, I just learned a lot about Keith Ellison, aka Keith Hakeem. And this man had some pretty forward-thinking ideas there. I mean, some radical thinking or thoughts and ideas, but then again, maybe not so. I mean, these are some ideas that are for our ancestors before us thought about as well and talked about. So, family, you tell me what you think, though. I'm curious what your thoughts are. When I first came across this, I thought, wow, this is pretty bold, but yet again, it's a plausible solution. Thank you very much for watching, family. Peace and love to you and yours. Please like, share, and if you haven't already, subscribe. This is Guru. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.